the 14th of February, 2024. I'm going to be your host tonight. My apologies. A little late here tonight. I'm Dana Durnford, also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. You can call in at 709-589-4406. Hope everybody had a great day. Bear with me, I get my bearings here. I'll explain that to you in a second. So last night, show was 2 hours. And when the show was over, we had 14 views according to the degenerate Google lobbyist, nuclear lobbyist at Google. At 36 likes, but 14 views. Every video they do to me, the video was exactly 2 hours long. Actually, 79 people was a really low number, so they're dropping those numbers too. And when the video was over, 12 hours later rather, after the video was over, I had an extra 6 seconds. So every video I do, exactly 12 hours later, I'll get an extra, typically I get an extra 6 seconds. We believe to put the software, so it's important you watch the video in the first 12 hours. The nuclear industry got no one to pick on, and so I'm their target. This was a little over, 2 hours ago. I got caught out. The plow came by. We're in a blizzard. Huge amount of snow all day. Today is going to be a blizzard all night. Snow all day tomorrow. Snow all evening. Snow tomorrow all night. Blizzard, or then blowing snow on Thursday morning. They're losing power out in some of the areas around me. And so I went down and plowed a couple of people's driveways that are in their 80s. They can't do it themselves, and neither one of them are healthy. So anyway, I comes back home and I sees the plow coming out, and I was like, let me guess, my driveway is... I didn't realize how bad it was actually going to be. I got a little clip. I got some clips at the end of it I'll play for you, but here's a little clip. So I got to try to dig a hole out of this, have I? I got no idea how I'm going to get in my driveway. Yes, so I was like, oh my God. And so I done it with just brute force. Finally got the bike put away. I'll show you that at the end of the show. Got the bike put away, and that was all in the last 2 hours, so it's been chaos. My hair is still a bit wet because you know what it's like when you got all the equipment on. You got to stick your head under the mop, right? Okay, so enough about me. Let's talk about scumbag nuclear. We got a poll tonight, help to articulate that. Should TEPCO be removed from Fukushima's 4 nuclear meltdowns, reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4? And at the top of the buildings were 2 fuel pools full of decades of reactor cores. And so they lost all of those fuel pools, which is 8 spent fuel pools. And you're talking about each of the reactor cores are equal to 100 Chernobyls. So you're looking at around 4,000 Chernobyls. So it's hard to process it. But what I do is I provide you with a whole lot of documentation. And if you still can't process it, then leave mommy's computer alone before she catches you. Because you're obviously a kid. So Fukushima Reactor 3, the ghost of Reactor 3, and the ghost of Reactor 4, that's just 2 of the 4 reactors. At the top of each of the buildings, the very top of these 19-story, 65-meter, 190-foot tall buildings was 4 decades of reactor cores. And so what they done was left those stumps, and they put these contraptions on top of it, and then pretended they were in the building. So all the world, this is just 4 of them, and these are the big medias, by the way. So you got Australia, the biggest media in Australia, the biggest media in the United Kingdom, the biggest media in the United States. And there's many more that done that in 2013. All the journalists have been doing it from day one. Now they're saying nothing got out of the buildings whatsoever. So when you look at the buildings, it's clear nothing got out, right? not. And the fuel pools are at the very top with the reactor cores. And so they picked up 30 million one-ton bags that we can confirm. And the food was banned by 55 countries for a decade because it's like a banana, right? And a potato chip and walking in the sunshine and climbing mountains and flying on airplanes and peanut butter and everything else. This model is based upon 30 days of radioactive fallout. This is the IRS in France's government model, and the model shows 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137. And so it has to be infinitely more of the curium isotopes, which is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod, and need lead shielding 20 times thicker. So that's France's model, based on 30 days of radioactive fallout. The entire planet. We've never seen nothing like this before. And we've never seen them hide buildings that are nuclear reactors that are completely gone. Well, they kind of done that at 3 Mile Island. They certainly done it at Santa Susana. But they didn't have these particular attributes where you had 5 reactor cores and 5 more reactor cores and the fuel pools at the top of the buildings. The official story is only 2.2 grams got it, which is equal to, some flakes of salt, basically. It's equal to 2 of those coins is all he said they got out of these buildings. So why are they making such lies? Why are they pretending they're in a building? Because that's pretty crazy, right? So reactor 1, that was the framing for the Kevlar sarcophagus for reactor 1. Now reactor 1 detonated. Let me do that again. It's an incredible detonation. So but this Kevlar sarcophagus simply just to hide it from view, not because this is special or you're going to be able to vent it or whatever. You can't go near the building. These are lethal doses. See how big the panels are? This was all constructed off-site and brought in and assembled with cranes. These are lethal doses. You can't get near it. It's the same thing with reactor 2. Reactor 2 kind of looks like it stayed intact, right? But you can see the heat signature at the very top right-hand corner. And so that went China syndrome deep into the earth. We're going to cover a lot of Noto, Ishikawa Prefecture. My apologies. Ishikawa Prefecture. Earthquake that happened on January the 1st. So we got some more updates for that. We're going to cover that right after we get through this stuff right here. And it's going to take a few minutes before we get to that, but then we got a whole bunch of Ishikawa prefectures. So that's reactor 2, that's reactor 1. These are complete loss, and you're talking about 2 fuel pools at the top of each of the buildings with around 10 reactor cores are also gone. Just one of these buildings melting down, not counting the fuel pool, dwarfs all nuclear meltdowns combined in history. This is Medusa, the reactor 3. This was the plutonium mixed oxide fuel reactor. These shouldn't exist. And just the emissions from a typical reactor that doesn't melt down, the radioactive atoms that are hemorrhaging from the fuel pools 24 hours a day into your community, and the majority of these nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. And that's very sinister, by the way. It shows you their contempt that they would build these things in prime farmland. Almost all of them are in prime farmland. And you'll see that when anything they're planning to build and any nuclear dump sites, you'll see the same attributes because the food gets shipped out, right? And then the radiation doesn't bioaccumulate so much in the environment because the food is shipped out constantly. So reactor 3 and reactor 4, I showed you reactor 1 and 2. What was really interesting was they used to look like that. That was the original footage, and every academic on the planet knew the reactor cores were gone. But then they stripped it down to this with the homeless and the destitute, the victims of society, and the immigrants that don't speak the language. Anybody who worked there would have died shortly after. So there's thousands of homeless missing. But reactor 3 to your left, that was a big detonation, right? I'll show you that video. And what you're going to see, that's reactor 1 over there. This is reactor 3. And you're going to see big chunks falling back down as the plume keeps rising. These are the reactor cores and 2 fuel pools with 8 reactors to 10 reactor cores. Because they don't have a repository anywhere in the world, let alone Japan, the fuel is kept at the top of the buildings. So they took these buildings, put these contraptions on it, then pretend that they were in the buildings that don't exist. And all your media has worked relentlessly to manipulate you. Now the official story is it didn't even melt down. There was no destruction. Nothing got out, despite the fact there was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. TEPCO's plumes, the numbers from TEPCO, of plutonium-239, these are 20-day models. So it's infinitely worse than that because these models are based on venting. But the official story now is nothing had happened, and the only thing that's getting out of it is 16.66666 of a gram each year. 0.062 of a gram a year is what's being released from the 1,000 tanks. So they're actually gone insane. They're actually insane. The International Atomic Energy Agency admitted on June 2nd, 2011, there was no such thing as a safe level of man-made radiation, and that the International Atomic Energy Agency, aka United Nations, they're just a company. I can call myself the International Atomic Energy Agency. They're just a company. They're not some regulatory agency. You need to get rid of them. They need to go. They are the worst thing can happen to a planet. And that their standards are based on natural stuff, not man-made. So the ultimate betrayal. This is the ultimate betrayal. A shocking betrayal. And Rafael Grossi is just the figurehead mouthpiece that gets in front of a camera. Remember, there's thousands and thousands of people working there. And the biggest donator to the International Atomic Energy Agency is, the third biggest one is China, or Japan. So the buildings don't even exist, but Rafael Grossi is out there this year telling everybody that never happened. Now, they're also claiming that there's no safe level and that their standards are based on natural stuff, not man-made. So what's the point of them? They're merely an international consensus. The studies have not found a safe level of radiation. So when they say it's merely an international consensus, it means the entire nuclear industry hates your guts. It means they're out to kill you and your loved ones, particularly your children and your planet. These are lunatics because they're not basing it on anthropogenic man-made radiation. They're basing it on bananas and potato chips, which doesn't come from reactors, in case you're confused. Japan's radioactive children, this is disgusting new scientist. Japan's radioactive children will be fine. The thyroid glands are only emitting 35 millisieverts. Only emitting, first off, they didn't. So millisieverts is basically, you got a Geiger counter, you're at a nuclear waste site or a nuclear power plant, and you're getting energy. This is not for physical atoms. Millisieverts is not for physical atoms. So the children are not, in order for them to radiate millisieverts, it means their body is saturated with anthropogenic man-made isotopes. And again, that's not what's going on here. Their body is saturated with isotopes, with atoms, radioactive fallout. And so take 35,000 microsieverts and multiply that by 750 atoms. And each atom, the body attacks it for the rest of their lives. And he said anything under 100 millisieverts is not dangerous. And so when they talk about these numbers, they're talking about fatal doses right away. Right? Just like the original, what they do is they say it's like natural stuff, see? So they're based on man-made, or they're based on natural, like bananas and potato chips, potassium and stuff, instead of uranium, plutonium, and americium, neptunium, which is anthropogenic man. See, because bananas and potato chips don't come from nuclear meltdowns or nuclear power sites. It's completely dishonest. It's insane. And so Tokyo newspaper, 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested have diabetes. That's 2012. So you got 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. You got 6 out of 10 children with diabetes. And the head of the Tokyo area medical clinic says we're expecting diabetes in children with Fukushima radiation. Radiation and health specialists. Japan with over 11 becquerels a kilogram of cesium start to see heart problems. So you can put 200 million atoms, which is each atom when it pulses, that's a becquerel. But it'll pulse a becquerel every second for just like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. Almost at the speed of light, these pulses are. That's the becquerel. So basically, a becquerel is the atom. So it's 11 atoms of cesium. We can't just have cesium. These are actual nuclear meltdowns, despite the fact that the degenerate, despicable scum of the earth, International Atomic Energy Agency, is now, as of July the 13th, 2023, saying that this never even happened. That nothing got there whatsoever. Now, let me go back to that for 1 second. So 11 becquerels a kilogram, and like whenever you talk about cesium, you should spit in their face. If they're doing it to your face, just spit in their face and get it over with, because that's what they're actually doing with you. You can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. So 11 is unbelievable tiny. In fact, it was easy to have 11 post-nuclear war, which he called nuclear testing, the same bombs, the same radioactive fallout. And irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram, which is 50 atoms a kilogram of their diet. Boris Johnson, 2 years before he got kicked out of the Prime Minister office in the United Kingdom, had removed all restrictions 2 years before last year, had removed restrictions for baby food and cereal from Fukushima nuclear wasteland. And 2 years later, which was last year, he removed the restrictions for everybody else. But the first restrictions moved from a nuclear wasteland was for baby food and cereal. And so he should be tried in criminal court, and then he should be sentenced to death. They should bring back the death penalty. And for him, it should be beheading or hanging. And his family should have to pull the switch. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. And they should be stripped of their assets and ostracized from the country. What he done is unexcusable. It's inexcusable. It's murder on a scale that the average person can't possibly comprehend. So 50 atoms a kilogram in humans, adults, leads to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. I'm going to talk about this again. So 11 becquerels a kilogram in children, they start to see heart problem. 11, which is 11 atoms. So what's going to happen to the insects with that? Because that's a huge dose for insects. That's a massive dose for birds. That's a massive dose for frogs and for raccoons and for rabbits and foxes and, you know, smaller mammals, right? That's a massive dose. And it's nothing compared to the actual numbers. So 50 atoms in an adult leads to irreversible lesions in the vital organs, which means your body now is under siege from white blood cells, trying to repair the damage constantly. And so you have less oxygen because you have less red blood cells carrying oxygen nutrition. And so cancer or illnesses, and a lot of the academic community has the majority of the population wrapped around their finger to believe that just cancer, they don't know any better. The industry has done nothing but lie for 80 years about adverse side effects from man-made anthropogenic radiation. It's a disgusting industry that has no right to exist another second. It really doesn't have a right to exist for another second. So children, this is the first year now, was, 6 out of 10 with diabetes. There was 865,000 extra cancers in 2012. In 2012, there was 13,646 children with thyroid tumors out of 38,000. But before that was 1 to 2 per million, pre-Fukushima. These are just on frightening stuff for the first year. Remember, 865,000 extra cancers is crazy, because cancer is not the only illness or disease or autoimmune deficiency or injury or illness that's going to manifest from radiation. So Helen Caldicott is one of the biggest anti-nuclear activists on the entire planet. She has 14 top-selling, best-selling books out there, but she's control opposition. Now, she's being asked in an interview, she's done this in hundreds of interviews, by the way, she's being asked, does Fukushima look like this, or does it, reactor 4, does it look like that, or does it look like this? And then I'm going to play a clip of Arnie Gunnarsson, because these are the people that the average person, when they're looking up the subject, are going to be spoon-fed every day of their life till they find me.
Let me ask you this. You've said that if the spent fuel pool in number 4 collapses, that you would evacuate your family from Boston. Think we would ever know the truth of what's going on there? And the reason I ask is because we've seen coverage in the national news media here in the United States from ABC News and others that take video cameras in, saying that they're being given exclusive access to number 4 in the removal of the fuel rods, which is said to have begun. And what we see in the video being shared here in America is a pristine interior building. It doesn't look like a building in which the top blew off in a hydrogen explosion.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
Well, you can't rebuild a site and say it's the same reactor. You can't. It doesn't work that way. Robots, which are humans, by the way, can't go into a nuclear meltdown. That's the problem with a nuclear meltdown. And she knows better. She's the control opposition. And so is Arnie Gunnarsson. Now listen to what Arnie Gunnarsson... Now Arnie used to make the racks for the fuel assemblies for the reactor cores and the fuel pools.
The Unit 4 was damaged twice. It was damaged by all of the earthquakes that occurred, and it was also damaged by a series of explosions over the first week or two of the accident. So the building is structurally weakened. Now, Tokyo Electric's acknowledged that. They went in May and June of last year. This is more than a year ago, and put an enormous number of extra structural supports directly under the fuel pool to keep the bottom of the pool from breaking through.
So Arnie made the assemblies, the racks for the assemblies, in 70 similar buildings in the United States, exact replicas rather. And so when he's saying they went in the building, they went in that building, which nobody's ever going in that building. There's no one going in that building. It's equal to 800 to 1,000 Chernobyls, that building is. So then he claims they went in, and the fuel pools are at the very top of the building. There is no top. The building is completely gone. As you can see, the building is completely gone. And so he's still out there peddling his propaganda. So what they done was they stripped the building down with the remote control cranes and the homeless when necessary. And then they put a contraption above it after. You can see he's starting to build it right there. And that's what Helen Caldicott is claiming. The building was perfect. Now it looks like that over there. These are the most vile, worst humans imaginable. These are disgusting maggots that are fed to everybody when they first try to work out what's going on here. Because she sounds like really sensible. She's got a doctor's degree. She's anti-nuclear, done 14 books. And she's literally one of the worst humans imaginable. In the history books, she's going to make Genghis Khan look like a charmer. U.S. government-funded study, West Coast, now we're going to get to the Noto Peninsula earthquake in a little bit. We just got to get through the rest of these headlines. U.S. government-funded study, the West Coast and Hawaii residents are Fukushima downwinders. Well, the whole planet's at Fukushima downwinders. That's 26 days later. The whole planet is covered in massive radioactive fallout. And so the effects of the radiation exposure are expected to be beneficial. U.S. government-funded study. So the government study from the United States said the radioactive fallout is expected to be beneficial. And this was your old crony, Dr. Raymond Gilmedy from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute, which is the military-industrial, and the Navy, the military-industrial complex itself. I think it's just horrible. And now he kills beagles, puppies, and beagle dogs on a rate you can't even wrap your mind around. The news media information related to the emergency triggering enormous social fear worldwide of the radioactivity that is being released for downwind populations where everybody's homedic effects, activated natural protective processes. So anthropogenic man-made radiation is going to activate natural processes. This is, and it's not a crime to lie to you about this, and it's not a crime to poison you with radiation. It's not illegal to poison you. Only the Nuclear Regulatory Agency has the authority, and they're appointed by each administration. And not a single nuclear regulatory authority on the entire planet has made it illegal to poison you. Otherwise, they couldn't slaughter you in the hospitals with radiation. Because what they're doing in hospitals with radiation, that's a slaughter. To suggest that anthropogenic man-made radiation is going to trigger natural protective processes, you should be viciously upset about that. You should be absolutely outraged. You should be indignant because somebody actually said something like that. That is one of the most criminal statements imaginable, and the entire planet is covered in radioactive fallout after 26 days, and they roll out government-funded studies and make these revolting assertions that it has no adverse side effects. Child's risk of cancer. Now, cancer is just one of the many illnesses and diseases, not immune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses, is 10 to 100 times higher than an adult who had the same exposure. It's 1,000 plus, 2,000 even worse, because the child is developing, right? So they're going to have radioactive hormones with their thyroid glands, and they're going to have mutated stem cells, radioactive stem cells. And so when you look at the species can't survive something like this. The insects in particular, right? And there's a huge population of birds that are dependent upon insects. So the majority of the little birds you're seeing right now are seed eaters. Like the winter birds are all seed eaters, right? 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested have diabetes, so it didn't have a hormetic effect. It didn't have a natural trigger, natural defenses. It made everybody sick. It was 358,000 of a million children with thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters. And the thyroid gland is only 3 by 5 centimeters. 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Extra cancers. And cancer is just one of the heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, autism, schizophrenia. You would expect to see all that skyrocket after a major nuclear accident because that's what the studies are being done on. And that's not it. There's an endless amount. Your immune system is compromised, so you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses and flus. So when your immune system is compromised, the elderly in particular, and children, you can have fatalities from the flu that normally would be completely harmless and benign. But when your immune system is compromised, then you're compromised. 45% of the kids in Fukushima survey had thyroid exposures up to 50 millisieverts, 50,000 microsieverts per year equivalent for 1-year-old. So when you do the per year equivalent, I think these people should have their arms tore off them, right? It should be done publicly, found guilty of crimes against humanity, and then they should have to tear all their limbs off and give them a stick so they can scratch their back with. The worst that human can offer is these people. Not just cancer, how low doses of radiation causes heart diseases and strokes. And so heart diseases and strokes now skyrocketed everywhere post-Fukushima. And they continue to ship the food from the nuclear wasteland. And all of these prefectures were banned by 55 countries because they're nuclear wastelands. The whole country should be banned. Everything from the country should be banned. Not just cancer, how low doses of radiation causes heart diseases and strokes, and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline. The list goes on and on and on. Scientists, the very lowest levels of radiation are harmful to life. We have to rethink the exposure levels from nuclear plants. Celebrated physician, Fukushima has humanity on the brink of a possible worldwide nuclear holocaust. And the world as we know it has changed, and that the effects on our health are incomprehensible. Well, they're not incomprehensible to people that are here regular, I can guarantee you. You're not going to beat any of them in a debate about Fukushima or the effects. So this is another model of Neptunium-239, which, by the way, decays to plutonium-239, based on TEPCO's numbers. So why are they saying that nothing got out since 2023, July the 13th, 2023? You have to be really concerned about what's going on here, because if you're not, you're going to be destroyed. Your health is being taken from you. France says Japan has lost control. The French should leave the country. March 16, 2011, because France wasn't stupid. Remember the model I showed you France earlier? Top cancer doctor, nuclear radiation, the most carcinogenic thing that exists. So why are they still growing food in a nuclear wasteland right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation? This is evil. Like, if I had to put out a book with this story pre-Fukushima, or a movie or something, I would have been just attacked by all the media worldwide for being ridiculous. This could never happen. It's ludicrous to suggest it, Dana. And they would have just mocked me. But they're the ones that are doing it to you today. Disinformation by nuclear proponents try to confuse the public with the effects of external and internal radiation. And there's such a list of them. The first 2 years after Fukushima, I came out and put endless academics and scientists and journalists on blast, and because they were saying it's like a banana and a potato chip. And for the first year in particular, that's all you heard, bananas, potato chips. The second year, but the third year, I was in full swing, and I was vicious. Anybody that said it, I had pretty harsh words. Officials unsure, well, basically harsh words for me were they should be thrown in a wood chipper. I soften it up a little bit. They should be arrested and have all their limbs cut off with a blunt axe. Officials unsure what to do next. Korea calls Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. That was that administration, right? The current administration is claiming nothing got out of the buildings. And we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more to get through. Nuclear report warns of an apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima in the weeks ahead. This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the entire planet, because radioactive fallout covers the entire planet and it never goes away. And Fukushima was a massive pulse event where you had roughly 40 reactor cores melt down, 2 fuel pools in each building, and so you had 8 running reactors, and at the top of each building was 8 to 10 reactor cores. And let's err on the side of reality and call it 10 reactor cores per building. So that's 40 reactor cores. Each reactor core was equal to 100 Chernobyls. And Chernobyl was brutal, but it was a brand new reactor. It didn't have any fuel pools. It was using graphite as a moderator, and it wasn't very much fuel in it. It was a very small reactor. Fukushima reactors are massive. The inventories in each reactor core it's insane. And so should TEPCO, the disgusting, despicable, hateful, monstrous planet killer TEPCO, which is who you're supposed to blame, is TEPCO, see? TEPCO's only left there so you can blame somebody instead of the nuclear industry, which you should blame every nuclear scientist. Every nuclear scientist, you should call him a piece of fucking shit the second you see him. You disgusting parasite. You didn't speak out about Fukushima, you fucking maggot. That's how you should treat these people. Even if they're your husband or your wife, you call them what they fucking are, scumbags. Should TEPCO be removed from Fukushima 4 nuclear meltdowns and 8 spent fuel pools explosion site? TEPCO shouldn't exist. It originally didn't, right? It was nationalized, and the despicable, hateful Japanese government took it over. They kept TEPCO there so you would blame TEPCO. So every once in a while I come to my senses and realize I got to mention who the real blame belongs to. So this could one day be considered, not one day, it is considered now, the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. Japan Times column, as the public, this is Japan Times, as the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, the truth will leak out about Fukushima, no pun intended. And every time you hear the word leak, a nuclear scientist should be thrown into a fucking wood chipper. Nobel Prize winner on NHK, which is a massive government-sponsored media in Japan. The only way to preserve human life is to completely turn away from disgusting disease factories known as nuclear power. Columnist, the truth must be told. Fukushima is a major global threat to all living flora and fauna. The mainstream media is not the best source of information. And Gunnarsson, I played a little video of him earlier, this despicable piece of shit, this disgusting piece of shit, that said TEPCO was inputting supports on a reactor 4 fuel pool. And he's told so many lies, it's absurd that people actually gravitate to him. Because he's very calm, he's got fair winds, and he's an assassin. He assassinates communities and cities and countries with propaganda. 70% of the children tested are contaminated with radioactive cesium, all of them from outside the Fukushima prefecture. Irreversible heart damage for children with an unbelievable tiny amount of radiation. And the food is many, 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 many times that limit right there. And they're shipping billions of pounds from the nuclear wasteland worldwide. Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days. Canada did. Which meant Japan couldn't ship the radioactive food from the nuclear wasteland anywhere, only Canada. And so the only people in Canada that benefited from that was doctors like Chris Kiefer, the Canadian for nuclear scumbag. Better nutrition shot. So let's talk about the Noto, Ishikawa Prefecture earthquake on January the 1st. We believe the Shika nuclear power plant reactor number 1 fuel pools melted down. The community was the biggest earthquake you can have on Japan's scale. Japan's scale is like the Richter scale. It's the same thing, except instead of being 1 to 10 and 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, etc., and then 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 3, and all the way up, Japan's scale is 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, all the way to 7. And so Japan had a 7 out of a 7. That's the biggest earthquake you can have, no matter where you're to on the planet. And it's very deceptive when they use this, and Taiwan uses the same scale. And if you look up the earthquakes in Taiwan, devastating earthquakes, you'll see why they use that scale. Because when they come out and say it's a 6, in the Richter scale, it's an 8.5. But when you hear a 6, who cares? It's a 6. Well, you should care if it's from Taiwan or Japan. So Japan, who's dropped the ball, wouldn't let the Americans, wouldn't let China, wouldn't let India and many other countries in the first 72 hours go on to the peninsula where they had their own search and rescue dogs, they had their own teams. These are all search and rescue specialists. And they travel around the world doing these humanitarian acts of good faith. Japan wouldn't even let the self-defense force go in and rescue people in the first 72 hours, which for survival is everything, right? And the Shika nuclear power plant itself, the Japan Times, which is the mouthpiece from the Japanese government, had said that the earthquake was 7 out of 7 in Shika town, right alongside the plant, and under the number 1 reactor, not the number 2 now, but the number 1 reactor, was an upper 5 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7, which means it's a 6 out of a 7, which means it's 8.4 on the Richter scale. In the basement of the number 1 nuclear power plant, or the number 1 Shika nuclear power plant, that had been shut down since 2011, but at the top of the building was 2 fuel pools with decades of reactor cores. And we believe strongly that that has melted down. And so this is why we're covering this, because we're trying to gather up evidence to build a picture. Now, we covered it pretty relentlessly for the first 30 days, January the 1st to January the 30th. And then not so much news is coming out, so we moved back into heavy, more nuclear than Noto, but we're still keeping tabs. Local government are dispatching nutritional specialists to evacuation centers in areas struck by the Noto Peninsula earthquake. And I just want to show you some more of the cruelty of the nuclear industry and the Japanese government, this complete disconnect. They got billions they're going to give to Ukraine, but they got nothing for these victims. And it concerns that the evacuees may become ill if they continue to eat imbalanced meals. The only reason they're eating imbalanced meals is because they've been abandoned by the government from day one. It's been more than a month since the earthquake, but more than a month, it's 7 weeks, is it? But cup noodles and retort pouched foods are still the main menus at evacuation centers. In other words, they don't have any food. And that's the Shizu, Ishikawa Prefecture, where the mayor came out originally and was quoted many times as saying 90% of the houses are destroyed. And you're talking about 5,000 houses, which is 4,500 houses were destroyed, flattened. But yet the only footage we see, and this is 7 weeks later, is where the tsunami came ashore. We don't see anything else, just that same section. And the tsunami didn't do the damage it was going to do because the coastline for 85 kilometers rose up 13 feet, and the coastline was now had a new 820 feet piece joined onto where the ocean rose up 820 feet of the coastline rose up 13 feet in the air, and that stopped a lot of the tsunami from doing serious damage. And part of that area is the Shika nuclear power plant, which we have gathered up the documentation on it. And if you don't think that the Japanese government is capable of hiding a nuclear meltdown, this nuclear industry has got to go. They got to go. So right now, they don't have any resistance. We need people to push back. We need people to republish these videos or republish the material. Bear with me. So the official story is that nothing got out of here. Let's go backwards though, because M4.8 earthquake hit central Tokyo. No tsunami is expected. It measured 4 in Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7 in central Tokyo, which is a 5.7 on the Richter scale in Tokyo. That's a significant earthquake, especially where there's 36 million people, right? Japan's nuclear regulators review indoor sheltering in case of a plant accident. Well, how hard would it be to put the word nuclear in front of plant? Right? Because a lot of people don't understand that picture, so they won't read the story. That's a very important story. For people around nuclear plants, when accidents coincide with natural disasters, guidelines set by the non-regulatory authority, Nuclear Regulation Authority, after the 2011, because that's when they were created. The triple, it was 4 nuclear reactors melted down, not 3. And you got, why don't they put triple nuclear meltdown instead of and it should be meltdowns with an S. Nuclear meltdowns. And we see that them do that little routine, that grammar omission many times, right? It's a regular thing with this despicable, hateful, disgusting, parasitic industry. Residents living between 5 and 30 kilometers of a nuclear plant, nuclear plant, are asked to shelter indoors. You don't shelter indoors for a gas plant. You got to shelter indoors for an oil plant. You don't got to shelter indoors for a coal plant or solar plant or geothermal plant or wind plant. Did they break down? And sheltering indoors is a death sentence. You're going to saturate your thyroid gland immediately. So now you're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of your life. And it's fucking downhill from there. Noto Peninsula earthquake, nuclear regulators to fine to evacuation. So there's 150,000 people within 30 miles. There's 150,000 people within 30 miles of the Shika nuclear power plant. Or 30 kilometers because they're metric, right? Sorry. And every time you see NHK media, you're talking about the scum of the scum. So here's all the journalists. Look how far they got them away from the idiots in the suits. And don't worry, they're not going to interfere with them. And like, these are not engineers. These are not working. They might be engineers, but they're not working engineers. Like, if I'm looking at somebody who looks like that, I'm not going to have any faith in them. If you got somebody with 50 years on the job and he stood up in the right gear, then you're going to respect him, right? Their job is to just, these are the regulators, these are the nuclear industry. Their job is to pacify you till you go away. Just tell you lie after lie after whatever lie it takes until you stop fucking looking at them. And when you see them, their hair is just white from age, and they haven't lost their hair. They haven't had a single worry in their entire life. They had no stress in their life. They cut your throat and go through your pockets and take the money and go down and buy their children toys. It just wouldn't bother them. So this is the Shika nuclear power plant right here. So they're claiming this is recent footage. Do not believe anything this industry tells you. If it's daytime, they tell you the sun is out, look up yourself and make sure. Don't believe anything this industry tells you. So again, if this was recent, like they're claiming today, right? If this was a few days ago, then this should be covered in snow because they had like 50, 60 centimeters of snow last week down there. So these buildings, the roof should be saturated. Everything should be covered in snow. So this apparently, and we know this picture is from Shik community. Now we don't know. Now Shik, look it up on Wikipedia today, had almost 21,000 people living in that community. And we seen a couple of pictures that we got earlier in the first, well, it was after like 3 weeks or something, and we finally got a picture. And it showed the road just torn up and telephone poles from liquefaction, right? At 45-degree angles. So yeah, Shika, Ishikawa Prefecture. Again, the industry is so deceptive. And so if this is recent footage, how come that is not cleaned up now? And this was another thing we noticed about the Noto Peninsula, was there was 1,400 landslides. They didn't clean them up. The majority of them are still not cleaned up today. But even in the communities where there was 30,000 evacuees, they were complaining because you couldn't traverse the town because the roads still weren't cleaned up. And a lot of it, just half a dozen people could have cleaned up. Now, every community got backhoes and heavy equipment, excavators, bulldozers, and all kinds of other heavy equipment, right? dump trucks, whatever. And so normally the community would just start cleaning up itself. In all the communities that we looked at in the first 30 days, we never seen that a single time. And the 30,000 people after 19 days were still living on a cup of water, not a glass, but a cup like a paper cup, a small cup. A cup of water, one a day, and a slice of bread. Not with butter, not with jam or anything else, but a slice of bread. Yet we covered a story there a few days back where the Japan Times came out and made the assertion that 170,000 self-defense forces were all over the peninsula doing good deeds right from the get-go. Why are they telling all of these lies? Why didn't they clean up? Why didn't they make it accessible? Why did they wait so long? Why wouldn't they let the international community go in with the search and rescue teams? We've never seen that before. Everything points towards Shika nuclear power plant having a meltdown at the fuel pool because they invoked the reactor 1 had an earthquake in the basement of a massive magnitude. They didn't say that the nuclear site because an earthquake does not isolate it to a basement, for goodness sakes. And so if this was original footage from the last couple of days, it would be nothing but snow mounts everywhere. Because just in a 2-day period, you had 50 centimeters of snow. That ain't going away. It's been freezing temperatures. It's dead winter down there. They're complaining because everything is covered in snow, right? So when you see this stuff and there's no snow, what's going on? That's the original footage. See, in the first 5 days, right, January 1st to January the 5th, there was no snow. And then the snow started and the rain started, right? And after that, it's been nothing but heavy snow. So when they're showing this footage, making a claim that it's the recent footage, but and I both know, because I've showed you this footage, if you've been around a bit, that where's all the snow? Did they, Photoshop the snow out to make it look nice? It's insane. The whole industry is just despicable. And you can see the cracks in the road right there. Shika. Now, we've seen other pictures of Shika where all the telephone poles are collapsed, the road is torn up, but it's just a couple of pictures in the first 30 days. 2 pictures, I think it was, is all we got of Shika. And we had one ridiculous media go there, and they went to the nuclear power plant and they shot pictures of the roof. And he showed it on TV. Pictures of the top of the part of the roof. That's what they shot at the nuclear power plant. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. Right, I remember everybody commenting on it. But this picture here is not Shika. That's Suzu. Right, we covered this. And this is old pictures and old videos because there's no snow. Like we've covered this picture, I think on day 12, 14 or something. Now we're in the day 44. Or 31, 41. It's day 45. We've covered all of this. The powerful earthquake that hit the Noto Peninsula in central Japan on New Year's Day destroyed many houses and structures. Well, they say now it's 40,000 houses are destroyed and another 15,000 are seriously damaged, which means you got another 100,000 that got serious damage too. Isolating many communities around the Shika nuclear power plant. And this prompted the authorities to discuss how to keep the residents safe if an accident at a nuclear plant coincides with a natural disaster. Japan's basic disaster management plan calls for residents whose homes have collapsed to shelter at evacuation sites and evacuate if they cannot stay indoors. The authorities decided to set up a team including outside experts to consider how to flexibly judge when to call for indoor sheltering, when to lift such an instruction, and areas targeted depending on how the natural disaster and the nuclear accidents are unfolding. So, 50 years of nuclear. Well, first off, the earthquake they had there was a 3,000-year-old fault line. It finally ruptured. And pre-2020, they had an average of 20 small earthquakes a year. And then in 2021, they had 8,000 small earthquakes. In 2022, the same thing, 8,000. 2023, 8,000. Like if I live somewhere and we have an average of 20 earthquakes a year, that's pretty rough anyway. And then then one year you have 8,000. Do you really think I'm going to stay there for another year? Is anybody really in their right mind going to stay there for another year? Like, so 8,000, I think, was, let me do the math for you. I know, normally I can just wing that off the top of my head, but I'm just barely in the door. I've been there plowing snow, and I can't keep up with it. I'm trying to get ahead of it, right? But obviously that's not working. And then the plow is going to come by again tonight or tomorrow morning and make it even worse again. But I had to dig myself in the driveway tonight before I can do the show. I'll play a couple of clips of that at the end of it, which is not going to be a long show tonight because everything hurts. My whole body hurts. Everything hurts on me. Okay, so you got 8,000 earthquakes. Divide that by 365. Like 40-something, 42 earthquakes a day, is it? Divided by 365 days. And how many earthquakes are you getting a day? 21, Dana. Did I say 40? Come on, Dana, where's your noggin tonight? So 21 earthquakes a day. Basically an earthquake every hour. 22 earthquakes, right? So you're getting an earthquake every hour. I'm only laughing because if I don't give a fuck where I'm to, if there's an earthquake every hour, I'm leaving. I don't care if you won't give me my money back. I'm fucking leaving. I'm not staying there. If I own a house there or I live there, I'm getting out of Dodge. I'm not staying somewhere where you get an earthquake every hour. So now they want everybody to rebuild back into the nuclear wasteland. And the Ishikawa Prefecture on top of that. And in the Noto Peninsula. Why would you rebuild back in a spot that has just had a 3,000-year to 4,000-year-old fault line rupture and drop, 50,000 homes and who knows how many businesses? Raised the coastline up 13 feet and gave you 800 extra 20 feet of coastline. So there's 6 harbors that can no longer be used. There's 56 harbors severely damaged from it. Like the 6 harbors where the boats were dried up, that were out in the harbor sitting under moors, were actually dried up because the ocean came up 13 feet and was 820 feet out to the sea. Almost 3 football fields out to the sea. Why would you stay there for? And why would you rebuild back there? What kind of madness is that? Oh, hot chocolate. I forgot. I thought I had tea. Brain dead. So you got 22 earthquakes a day. This is insanity, right? Why would you stay there? The authorities, which are literally the worst losers in humanity, on Wednesday confirmed the effectiveness, the authorities, which is the Nuclear Regulatory Agency, right? Remember that's how that started off. On Wednesday confirmed the effectiveness of combining evacuation and indoor sheltering to avoid radiation exposure. How can you avoid radiation exposure? Like say your house is airproof. No air can get in. The radiation fallout pulls right through your house and out the other side. So how can it be effective? Now, first off, you got to breathe. So you're going to be breathing. Now, the water is going to be immediately contaminated. The air is contaminated. It's all downhill from that. There's no way not to. And so for the Nuclear Regulation Authority on Wednesday confirmed the effectiveness of combining evacuation and indoor And who is the authority? That's these people right here. Look. They said, no, it's safe to stay indoors. Check. Give me a check, please. Him and this one there, and they're like, yeah, no, totally safe. Go indoors, shut up. You don't want to be a bad citizen. These are horrible monsters. Every fucking thing to do with the nuclear industry. And like I do a 2-hour show typically 5 days a week, and all I cover is the lies in the 24-hour news cycle. And we put in Fukushima, of course. We cover Fukushima if there's any news available, which is a extinction level event. If you go back and look at my research expeditions, then how can you deny it? Japan agency taps crowdfunding to help quake-hit businesses. Japan agency taps crowdfunding. Like, this is not the stupidest thing imaginable what actually is. The government wouldn't let nobody go in the first 72 hours. No search and rescue teams were allowed to go in the most critical time imaginable. They abandoned the people who were living on a cup of water and a slice of bread a day for 19 days straight that I know of, that I can back up, that we covered, that you can go back and watch my videos, and the whole friggin' thing is there, and it's also all of these headlines are in the description. Japan quake leaves a deep scar on the famed Noto sake brewers, which is a nuclear wasteland. In front of his shop in Wajima, Ishikawa Prefecture. So this is one of the rare pictures, Ishikawa or Wajima, where they don't show us where the 200 houses and buildings burnt down, because that's generally the only pictures, besides a little bit of the tsunami, that you'll ever see. But this was a crumble. This is insane. It's like slowly, very slowly, evidence is trickling out that my assertions, unfortunately, were right. Manhole pops up from the streets. It's not just, manholes. There's just endless amounts of them, and they're still popping up today from the liquefaction. And see this piece of equipment right there? That's the only piece of equipment we've ever seen them use in 45 days. And that's the same piece, right? But here's the manhole. Like, they go all the way down to the sewer. And so the liquefaction has pushed the whole thing up in the air. See collapsed buildings in the background? So they've been cutting them off and putting a sheet of steel over it. But you need those sewages for drainage, right? For rain and snow. And so if this was recent footage, you would expect to see a lot of snow there. Underground manhole shafts are rising from the road by over a meter in some areas, 1.3 in other areas. Impacted by the Noto Peninsula earthquake, obstructing roads, hampering recovery efforts, and vexing citizens. And the phenomenon of rising or floating manholes is believed to be caused by ground liquefaction due to the earthquakes and the constant aftershocks. I mean, they get 21 earthquakes a day anyway. Although the central Japanese government has been working on countermeasures nationwide, Wajima, so the whole country has these particular attributes, Wajima and Suzu City has not yet taken action to prevent the manholes from floating. This was this is a 3,000-year-old fault line just ruptured after 3,000 years. You have to be insane to build back in that hole. Both cities were hit by major tremors. These were massive earthquakes, not tremblers. And notice now they're using it constantly, tremors and tremblers, with a nil. Now they almost never use the word earthquake anymore. And manholes have been popping up all over the place. Cones have been placed to warn people about the obstructions, and some roads have been closed to traffic. And if the manholes are not removed, vehicles carrying disaster refuge will not be able to enter the area. In late January, on a city street in the central Wajima, manholes were found to have risen above the ground at 3 locations within 40 meters of one another, and some were protruding the street by about 1.2 meters. And so, which means, the buildings are unstable because of the liquefaction, right? Like the Niigata prefecture had 6,900 buildings that are destroyed because of liquefaction, which is the same thing as causing the manhole covers over here. But the Fukai Peninsula, where there were 7 running nuclear power plants, we still don't know nothing about that. They had massive damage done there too. And they've never showed anything or mentioned anything about it, except once in every week or something would just mention it that there was damage. But I didn't realize at the time there were 7 nuclear reactors running there at that time. A man who owns a parking lot facing the street says, I'm having trouble getting my car in. In some places, manholes arose long after the earthquake. In the Chiba prefecture, which is by Tokyo, in 2011, suffered significant liquefaction damage. In 2011, the aftershocks also increased the damages. According to the useless ministry, only 47,000 kilometers of the 86,000 kilometers of major sewage pipes in Japan have been earthquake-proof. Nothing is earthquake-proof, by the way. Including measures to prevent manholes from rising, where they weigh them down, Neither Wajima nor Suzu had taken those measures before the New Year's Day earthquake struck. Why does Shika not get no... Water supply restoration could take years. This was January the 16th story. Water supply restoration could take years. The misery, the unsanitary conditions, the hygiene problems caused by severed water supplies, of quake-ravaged Ishikawa prefecture could continue for weeks or even longer. No, years. The family members in the shelters were wearing the same clothing for 2 weeks. They took from their now unlivable homes. The clothes have become dirty, but there's nothing else for the family to wear. Well, the government abandoned them. In Suzu, both water and sewage systems are crippled. They're not crippled, they're destroyed. Roads sank, rose and cracked in the earthquake. And the pictures of that stuff is quite telling. Let me bring up some of these pictures. Because we didn't collect them when we did, they wouldn't exist, would they? They won't show them to you anymore. Let me just remind you with some pictures. Here I got a bunch of my favorite pictures. Oh. That's the wrong earthquake, hang on. Shika, that's what we're looking for. Wabigoon, there we go. Let's look at these pictures so you can get some context. So the whole peninsula was like this. Or like that. And like this. And like that. These are landslides. They had 1,400 landslides. Look at the road right up here. That's insanity, right? This is Wajima City, where 200 houses and businesses in a 1,000-year-old district, heartbreaking, right, had burnt to the ground. And you don't see any lights, fire trucks, any ambulances. You don't see any equipment at this site. This is Wajima, where the tsunami came ashore. And they recycle, or Suzu, where the tsunami came ashore. And they recycle these pictures over and over and over. And this picture in close-ups, they feed that to you constantly. But there's around 5,000 buildings apparently destroyed in this community. But they don't show you any of that. You see pictures like this? This was part of the 150-kilometer fault line that ruptured, that was 3,000 to 4,000 years old, which ran right through Shika City And apparently the basement of the number one reactor. Not the number two, which is 100 feet away, but the number one reactor. Look at this kind of damage, though. This is catastrophic. And if you didn't catch it originally, you'll never see it again, right? That's where the tsunami came ashore. In January the 1st. And we didn't get any of this for at least how many days? 8, 9 days? And this is the rare footage, right? Where you get these random pictures of communities. That's not the regurgitated pictures they've been feeding everybody. This is one of those regurgitated pictures. And there's some fire hoses, which is very unusual to see in that picture. And this picture here, again, you see these fire hoses, right? But you don't see equipment, you don't see backhoes, you don't see excavators, which is normally what you would see. Again, even in situations like this, the backhoe would come in and would use to hold up the building because they were having an aftershock every 7 minutes. Excuse me. This is one of the landslides where people are trying to work their way out. And this was another one of those rare pictures where they didn't feed you the regurgitated pictures. And so that's what this collection was about. Again, this is one of those Fukushima district where there's 200 buildings burnt. But there's around 5,000 buildings destroyed in that community. We've never seen pictures of it. We get all kinds of pictures of the 200 houses and businesses that burnt, to the point where I get upset about it, right? This was a 7-story building that was considered earthquake safe. And the shaking was so intensive that it came up so high because generally they drive down huge steel pilings deep into the earth. They pour cement down. Then they drive the pilings down into the fresh cement. And then the building is built around that. And so that way the building can't tip over, see? But it was so much shaking, the building actually jumped off its support, which is supposed to be impossible. Again, more like you see, this damage is insane. This was a catastrophic earthquake, right? But you don't see heavy equipment, do you? Now this is obviously tsunami damage and landslides. And this is not the first time Japan has hid severe damage, right? They've done it literally every single time. This is Suzu, where the tsunami came ashore. This was something like 22, 23 days before we finally got this footage. How come? And why crop it? Why not show the whole community where there's thousands of homes destroyed? Why do they just feed you this small section over and over and over for 45 days? And I really despise seeing the pictures so often of the same thing. Now this was Shika. This is one of the pictures from Shika. And we only got, I think, is 2 pictures from Shika where there's 21,000 people because nobody owns a phone up there apparently. Nobody has cameras. The media doesn't go there apparently. This is Suzu where the tsunami came ashore. Well, this is very early on, right? Because there's no snow. This is Hakko. This is right by Shika. That's where Hakko is to, Ishikawa Prefecture. This is right alongside of the Shika community. So that was the other picture. That's another shot of it there. I can't remember where this one was to, but this was a standard picture for all those communities, by the way. And this was the Suzu, where the tsunami came ashore. You get, and look at the damage to the road there, and look at again, you just get these sections of the community only. You don't get the rest of the community. How come? So normally you'd think they would show you the rest of the community to get some sympathy and for the international community, and they would raise a huge chunk of necessary funds. We get, and when you look at the damage, that's a real earthquake. That's some serious damage right there. And so this is what it would look like right now. And you can see the coastlines before and then after. And so this is all new coastline right here. Now it's not just the coastline. The community is doing the exact same thing. So it's not just the coastline, right? Thousands of survivors, this is today's story. Thousands of survivors struggling as accusations of neglect grow. And Jim McCurry in Tokyo, what a degenerate. We've covered him so many times now. Despicable people, man. Kishida, which is the current prime minister, a useful idiot, was accused in Parliament today, or yesterday, of waiting too long to send members of the self-defense forces to the worst hit areas. You know, like American Navy wanted to send in search and rescue teams with dogs, specialized teams to get people in the first 72 hours, and before the most dangerous time, right? An initial force of 1,000 self-defense members were sent to help that number. Now, that was all in Niigata. That was out. That wasn't on the peninsula. They didn't go on the peninsula. And we mocked them. We had many, many polls. You can go back and see those videos where we mocked them with polls saying, should Japan rescue the hundreds of thousands of victims abandoned by the government? Should they use helicopters to bring in supplies and give it to the victims? So why didn't they use helicopters? In the first 27 days or something, 26 days, they didn't use helicopters. And we had several polls about should they use helicopters to bring in supplies. Because they can put it on pallets and bring it in, just drop it in the community and fly away. They don't even have to land. You know, on day 25, there were still 13 communities that they hadn't reached. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. When they have helicopters. He didn't. So why did they avoid going on the peninsula? Why wouldn't they let the international community go in with search and rescue teams? Because they got Geiger counters? Because the Shika nuclear power plant number 1 reactor fuel pool melted down? So 1,000 SD self-defense force members were sent to help, but that was on the outside, not on the interior, not on the peninsula itself. That number rose to about 7,000 2 weeks later. Why would you wait 2 weeks? What the frig is going through your mind? You wait 2 weeks. The only thing that can invoke all of this would have been a nuclear meltdown at the Shika nuclear power plant. Still pales next to the 26,000 troops deployed in the aftermath of the Kumamoto earthquake in 2016, and there was 22,000 deployed in 2018 at my brain is gone. Let me bring it up. It's easier to bring it up if you can't remember. The Hokkaido earthquake. Man, she's a blizzard out there right now. It's hellish out there. It really is. It's nasty. It cuts your face out there. Yeah, that was 22,000. Let me bring this up. So the Hokkaido earthquake in 2018, they sent in 22,000 troops. That's an island. That's isolated. They managed to ferry them in with the helicopter. They actually used helicopters, right? Now, that earthquake in 2018, they said was a 6.6 magnitude earthquake. And the registered a 6.7 magnitude with a maximum seismic intensity scale of 7 on the Shindu scale. A 7 on Japanese Shindu scale. Well, 6.7, which is what the official story came out, on the Richter scale would have been a 9.5 earthquake. Now, what was interesting about that was the Tamari nuclear power plant. Well, you can see the X, that's where the earthquake happened. It was on land. And look where the Tamari nuclear power plant is too. And let me get out of the way here. And you can see the scale to your right, 50 miles, 120 miles or something. Okay. So that was a 7 at the Japan seismic intensity scale of 7, which is just like what happened in Shika community, right? It was the same thing. Okay. So we know of another 7. It's the Hakito earthquake in 2018. So let's show some footage of that. Here's the manhole covers rising up over there too in 2018. I'll put that on the big screen actually. You can see the displacement. But look at the landslides. Now that don't really do it justice. Now have you ever seen landslides where all sides of the mountains, as far as you can see the payloads, on every side of the mountains were dropped? Have you ever seen that before? Because the international media said it was a 6.6 magnitude earthquake. It only came out later that it was a 7 out of a 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. And that's what a 7 out of a 7 looks like. And that's the exact earthquake they just had in Shika. And so how come we haven't got any footage from Shika? Look at all the payloads of the mountainsides. I get some better pictures. Look at this one here. This is insane. I mean, look at the mountain has lost all the payloads. And so, like, it's hard to comprehend what that's like on the ground, but look at it. The Japanese registered a magnitude 6.7 magnitude, but on the international scale, the Richter scale, but on Japan scale was a 7 out of a 7, the worst it could have. But it was only 6.6, they say, on the Richter scale, because that's what the international community. But have you ever seen a 6.6, 6.7 earthquake drop the payloads of all the mountains? And so Japan is claiming that a 7 on their scale is only equal to a 6.7 on the Richter scale. That's basically what they're suggesting, aren't they? This is not a 6.7 earthquake, right? Neither is that, neither is this. These are unbelievable earthquakes. Anything that can drop the payloads of all the mountains, like, it's absurd. As far as you can see, right? It dropped the payloads on all sides of the mountains. That's the same size of the earthquake they just had in the Shika community, is what we're looking at right now. This is the same scale of earthquake where the Shika nuclear power plant is too. Is that why we're not seeing any footage from that community or the nuclear power plant? I'm assuming it is. Okay, back to Kishida. The Prime Minister is already battling record low approval ratings. He promised his government would do everything possible to help the region recover. Like, he came out with press releases, we got 27,400 homes for the evacuees outside the prefecture. Turns out that's not true. That they sent in 170,000 self-defense forces. Turns out that's not true. They claimed that they had lots of supplies and everything was great and medical attention. That absolutely wasn't true. They wouldn't let the international community go in there with search and rescue teams and specialized dogs. The cabinet approved $700 million in relief funds, and that's all going to be stolen by the government itself because it's so corrupt. And claimed he flew over the devastation from a helicopter, but we don't got no footage of him in a helicopter or the footage that they took. And then you feed your picture like this. Even though food and water are crucial for survival, some people seem to be refraining from eating or drinking so that they do not need to use the toilet so often because they don't have any water to flush it. A magnitude 7.6, but they say in Shika was a 7 out of a 7. and there's a 150 kilometer fault line, 3,000-year-old fault line that ruptured, that runs right through there. But they say it's a 7 out of 7. All kinds of media, we covered it. I got all kinds of the evidence. We already covered it. But why don't they show some pictures? Like every other earthquake. The authorities received 4,000 applications to move into temporary housing units that are equipped with heating and baths. Of course, it's winter. Heating and bathrooms. Of course, you got to have heating and bathrooms. And so they move them into these little, remember these buildings? This is where they moved the radioactive victims 10 or 15 miles away from the nuclear meltdowns and stuck them in these things. And they had vending machines there that would sing "Don't Give Up on Fukushima" whenever you went to get a Pepsi or something. You put your money in to get a Pepsi or a coffee or a bag of chips, and it would sing "Don't Give Up on Fukushima, sucker." An evacuation center in the town of Shika. One of the victims says he has struggled to sleep surrounded by other people and could think only of how to stay warm and avoid becoming ill. That's a story from today. Why are they thinking that way today? Surely they got heat. Surely they got supplies and blankets and everything else. Why is he invoking that he could think of as how to stay warm and avoid becoming ill? Surely doctors are there. This is Shika, where they had a 7 out of 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. The tens of thousands of collapsed and burnt out buildings. As far as I know, there's only 200 buildings burnt out. So, like, why invoke that when because that's the only pictures they generally show you is the same pictures over and over, right? But there's tens of thousands of buildings collapsed. We've never seen that. At best, we've seen around 25 buildings after 45 days. Reader believes the Nuclear Waste Management Organization has made a ludicrous claim here in Canada. Yeah, because the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which is the industry itself, by the way, has $28 billion and spent 19 years looking for a place in Canada to put his nuclear waste, and has never found anything. It's spent a lot of money. You can imagine how much interest they're making every year on $28 billion. They just throw millions of dollars around in every community, but they got no intentions of doing it. The idea is not to do it because it's splitting atoms into the environment. You can't exterminate everything unless you let that stuff hemorrhage into the environment unmitigated, which is what 1,000 fuel pools worldwide is doing. There is no containment in the fuel pools, see? It's still splitting atoms. And each fuel pool is multiple reactors. Each reactor was splitting atoms for 1 million homes. It's still splitting atoms but there's not for 1 million homes. It's just splitting it to poison everybody in 1 million homes. Also of concern is the way the Nuclear Waste Management Organization's article tries to promote their proposed nuclear waste site near Ignace, Wabigoon and Dryden. He said, I spotted a bogus claim made by the Nuclear Waste Management Organization in a sponsored content story. In other words, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization here in Canada paid for it. They stated every day millions of Canadians, including those in northwestern Ontario, rely on nuclear energy for electricity to power their homes and businesses. He said this is a ludicrous claim. The nuclear reactors in southern Ontario at Pickering, Darlington, and Bruce are 1,600 kilometers away from Thunder Bay, and more than that from Dryden and other locations to the west. And if some temporary additional electricity was needed to balance the grid up there, they would get it from Manitoba or Minnesota, not from Ontario, Canada. Well, first off, Graham, the nuclear industry are scumbags. There's nothing they won't say. There's no lie too big for them to tell. But we appreciate you doing that. I can't believe you actually made it into the media on top of that. If one were reading quickly, the next paragraph begins, more than 50 years. He said, I challenged the Nuclear Waste Management Organization to provide the evidence, the times, and the amount over the last 50 years that nuclear generators electricity reached Thunder Bay and other communities in the Northwest. I think that's brilliant. I really do. That's a brilliant letter. And also of concern is the way the Non-Nuclear Waste Management Organization article tries to promote their proposed nuclear waste site. The sponsor content article states used nuclear fuel a couple of times that glosses over the complexity of the high-level nuclear waste that is dangerous for approximately, in his version, 100,000 years. Is millions of years, right? Like the iodine-129, for instance, got a 15 million year half-life. That's 150 million years, just 10 half-lives. They're not dealing with ashes from used firewood. That was a great article. We certainly appreciate people like that. First Nations calls on the Fed to oppose a nuclear waste disposal site near the Ottawa River. And so that story's getting a lot of traction, but there's a lot of propaganda being inserted in there by the medias. It should have never got permission, but the Canadian nuclear laboratories, where we're talking about Chalk River, where they had 2 nuclear meltdowns, and they just grouted them into place. Like, the Canadian, like Canada, there is no Canada, there's the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry captured Canada in the 40s and 50s, and it has choked the shit out of the country ever since. Canada doesn't exist. It's a despicable industry that murders everybody in the hospitals with radiation when they get sick. Canada and Britain teams up on nuclear fusion development. Oh yeah, Canada and Britain. GOP warning of a national security threat is about Russia wanting nuclear weapons in space. Which is just such a strange story. It said it's not to drop a nuclear weapon on Earth, but to possibly use it against satellites. Well, in that case, they could possibly be going to use it against, say, meteorite, right? They could possibly be using it just as a decoy. And so this is just more fear-mongering from the military-industrial complex, so you'll spend the money. Americans, look at this guy here. He looks like a mummy that was rehydrated, eh? Americans understand there was a range of threats and challenges in the world that we're dealing with every single day, such as terrorism. How many terrorists does it take to equal a jet fighter? How many terrorists does it take to equal an Abrams tank with the depleted uranium, the DOLRAM, the depleted uranium low-level radioactive material, 155 millimeter shells? How many terrorists does it take to equal one of them, I wonder? 1,000, 2,000? How many terrorists does it take to equal an aircraft carrier? 1 million, 2 million, 3 million? He said, I'm confident that Dementia Biden, in the decision that he has taken, is going to ensure the security of the American people. No, all these endless wars, 900 bases worldwide, is, you go down and you rape everybody in a country, you're causing terrorism. And they're not terrorists, they're desperation to survive, because you're eradicating them for a military-industrial complex, ultimately. But you're doing it for a paycheck. You're, like, what they went to Afghanistan, millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, 6 million orphans, to get 10,000 Taliban. 10,000. And they fired 5.5 million rounds a month for 9 years to get 10,000 Taliban. 90,000 rounds per soldier. They had 28 suicides a day with the veterans coming back from there because of the things they'd done they couldn't live with anymore. They got rid of the pensions and the patents of the country. So when there's nothing left to kill or shoot, and they nailed every school, every water facility, they destroyed everything with depleted uranium munitions on top of that. So then they went over to Iraq and done the same thing. Then they went to Libya, and then they went to Syria to get the 10,000 Taliban, the same 10,000 Taliban, who had now, a couple of hundred of them went to Syria and became ISIS. And so they went there and they wrecked it. They flattened it to get the remainder of the Taliban has now become ISIS. There's 10,000. So it started off with 10,000 Mujahideen. Russia was there for 10 years. The Americans went there for 10 years. Then it was 10,000 Taliban. Then it was 10,000 ISIS. And then part of them, 10,000 Taliban / ISIS, went to Africa and became the Boko Haram, where there's 10,000 Boko Haram. So you had 10,000 Mujahideen, 10,000 Taliban, 10,000 ISIS, 10,000 Hamas, by the way, 10,000 Boko Haram. Any patterns? Anybody seen fucking patterns here besides me? Or am I just the only one? And what they done to Syria, they created 7 million refugees. And they flew millions of them all over the world, just like they done with Ukraine, right? Right away. This is what they done to Syria to get 10,000 ISIL, which was a breakaway from the 10,000 Taliban. 10,000, right? They went into a city of millions of people. Well, you can figure it out yourself. You know, when I first seen that footage, I threw up. I threw up. They flattened that whole city to get a couple hundred ISIS members. And they done that everywhere. That's what they done, right? They get a couple hundred Taliban. And so when despicable, disgusting parasites like that fucking creature right there, Jake Sullivan, right? You got any idea what kind of soulless monster that person actually is? Now Pickering, and they always show, every time now we notice when they talk about Pickering nuclear power plant here in Canada being refurbished, which is literally the stupidest thing imaginable, they show us people on the beach. There's some sick people, man. Look at these two morons. Actual real-life morons. Look at it. The United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authorities and the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories are partnering to accelerate fusion energy. They're partnering to accelerate fusion energy. And they're signing a memorandum of understanding between the United Kingdom and Canada. Well, first off, why are you wasting all the precious metals on the planet, all the resources, all the academics, and all the taxpayers' money on that when you can just build everything in a couple of years with geothermal? Why are you trying to build something that doesn't exist as a solution for a crisis when you can just take geothermal and be done with it? Like, what kind of monsters are you people to deny humanity a way forward? United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority and the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories are partnering to accelerate fusion. So you got United Kingdom Atomic Energy Agency, Canadian Nuclear Laboratories. Bulgaria's 2 U.S. nuclear reactors to cost under $14 billion. Like, is anybody really that gullible to fall for that one again? Like, Sizewell was only supposed to cost $7 billion in 2007, is now at 58 billion US dollars. I'm sorry about that. Let me turn that off once. I guess I could have ducked a picture so you didn't have to have that imprinted in your mind anymore. I got a couple of little videos here to get through from 4 hours ago. A little less than 4 hours ago, I shot these videos. I was down the road. There's a couple of old people down there in their 80s. And I know the man is not very healthy at all, right? So I like to keep his driveway open if I can. So when I came back to the house to plow my driveway, oh man, the plowhead came by, left me a very unpleasant surprise. So how the hell do I get in my driveway? Bloody plow. I got no idea. I don't know if I can plow that. Oh my God. I think they gave me some extra fucking stuff. Jesus. So I gotta try to dig a hole out of this, have I? I got no idea how I'm gonna get in my driveway. I don't know, I might put the heater on and clean this out. And this is an insulated one. And then you got the normal one that'll come down and zip. And so I'll clean out a bit of snow, close it up, and I gotta do a show in about an hour and 15 minutes. So I gotta get busy here. Bye-bye. I gotta get busy. You got no idea how busy I got. I punched a hole through it eventually. I got stuck a couple of times. Tonight I had to go wrap a winch around a telephone pole one time and a tree another time and yank myself out. Gotta love the winches, eh? Okay, so I got my headphones on. Don't need them. I just had to check the volume when I started playing the video for you guys. Okay, so I'm a little lost here. What am I supposed to be doing? Yeah, well, I don't get snow like Dana Nasana done. Dana Nasana, man, he got snow down there. I'd still be out there crying. Shitepco and Dana got all the equipment, but it's still a massive amount of snow to try to clear. Should TEPCO be removed from Fukushima's 4 nuclear meltdowns and 8 spent nuclear fuel pools explosion? I think everybody agrees. Somebody accidentally said no. They're probably on a cell phone and their big fingers are swelled up from the cold weather and they accidentally hit no, I guess. Because surely nobody would say, why would you say no to that? Usually TEPCO would come in and spam you when you've done those kind of polls. They're very defensive, eh? Okay, so let's end the poll. I'll feel better tomorrow, but my stomach is hurting from all the work today and my back is hurting. My arms are hurting. I was soaking wet when I came in the house. I was warm though, but I was soaking wet. You don't realize it, right? Then all of a sudden you're soaking wet. Yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you. Good night everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Hopefully. I got a shit day tomorrow because that plow is coming back tonight and tomorrow morning. It's going to be still a blizzard out there right now. And where my shed was too, right? The wind had changed from a northeast to a northwest. So that last video didn't sound quite so bad. But if you go stand up in it, you can't open your eyes and look into it. It's that bad. It's gusting around 80, is blowing around 85 or something. 50 something, 55 mile per hour or something like that. It's pretty heavy winds. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm making passes back and forth the street. But the thing is too high, and I'm not healthy enough to use a shovel. Now I have like a snow shovel, but the snow is really wet and really heavy, so it's very difficult to use the small snow blower on it. I appreciate the thought though. Okay, I can't believe we made it. How good did we do? Well, we made it to the 2 hour, I do believe. No, close to it. Hour and 45, is it? I wasn't expecting to make it through an hour, to tell you the truth, but once you sit down and you start pacing yourself, that's the way it rolls out. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. See everybody tomorrow night. James Lucid, extra hugs for James, donated 130 last night, my goodness, which is great timing. See everybody on the other side. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.